Eternal Love Beneath the Waves, The Tragic Tale of Awa and Babacar. Chapter 1. A Love Born in Dakar. In the heart of Dakar, where the air was filled with the rhythms of Mbalak's music and the rich aroma of traditional Senegalese dishes, Awa and Babacar's love story began. The city was alive with energy, its streets bustling with vendors selling everything from colorful fabrics to fragrant spices. Amid this vibrant chaos, Awa, a 24-year-old woman with dark, soft skin and long black hair tied with a red scarf, lived her life with passion and purpose. Awa was known in her neighborhood for her kindness and beauty. She had a warm smile that could light up a room, and her laughter was infectious. But behind her cheerful exterior was a young woman with dreams of returning to her homeland in Casamance, where she and her future husband would build a life together. One evening, during a festive celebration in Dakar, Awa's path crossed with Babacar's. The celebration was a lively affair, with the sounds of drums and kora filling the air as people danced under the stars. Awa, dressed in her favorite red and blue attire, moved gracefully to the rhythm of the music, her eyes sparkling with joy. Babacar, a 30-year-old man with a strong, muscular build and a deep black complexion, noticed Awa from across the crowd. He was immediately captivated by her vivacity and beauty. Babacar was a man of few words, known for his calm demeanor and thoughtful nature. He had come to Dakar in search of work, but his heart yearned for the peaceful life of Casamance, where he hoped to one day return. As the night wore on, Babacar gathered the courage to approach Awa. He was drawn to her not just by her beauty, but by the way she seemed to light up the entire celebration with her presence. When he finally introduced himself, Awa was struck by his sincerity and the quiet strength in his eyes. They talked for hours that night, finding an unexpected connection in their shared dreams of returning to Casamance. Babacar spoke of his desire to build a home in the lush green region, and Awa shared her hopes of raising a family in the land of her ancestors. By the time the night ended, they both knew they had found something special. Chapter 2. The Blossoming of Love. In the weeks that followed, Awa and Babacar's bond grew stronger. They spent every moment they could together, exploring the vibrant streets of Dakar, sharing meals of tieboudienne and yassa, and talking about their dreams for the future. Awa admired Babacar's calm and steady nature. He was a man who thought deeply before he spoke, and when he did speak, his words carried weight. Babacar, in turn, was enchanted by Awa's liveliness and her passion for life. She was like a burst of color in his otherwise quiet world, and he couldn't imagine his life without her. Their love blossomed quickly, fueled by their shared dreams and mutual respect. They often talked about the home they would build together in Casamance, a small house surrounded by nature, with a garden where Awa could grow vegetables and flowers, and a workshop where Babacar could craft furniture. They dreamed of a life filled with love, family, and the simple joys of living close to the land. As their relationship deepened, Awa and Babacar knew they were ready to take the next step. They began making plans to return to Casamance, where they would get married and start their new life together. The thought of returning to the land of their ancestors filled them with excitement and anticipation. Finally, the day of their departure arrived. Awa and Babacar packed their belongings, said their goodbyes to friends and family in Dakar, and made their way to the port where the Joola ferry awaited. The Joola was a large white ferry, adorned with the green, yellow, and red bands of the Senegalese flag. It was a symbol of their journey home, a journey that would take them back to their roots and into the future they had dreamed of. Chapter 3. Aboard the Joola. As Awa and Babacar boarded the Joola, they were filled with hope and excitement. The ferry was crowded with passengers, all of whom were eager to reach Ziguinchor in Casamance. The air was filled with the sounds of laughter and conversation as families and friends looked forward to reuniting with loved ones. Awa and Babacar found a spot on the deck where they could watch the sun set over the Atlantic Ocean. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the water shimmered in the fading light. As they stood together, holding hands, they felt a deep sense of peace. "This is it, Babacar," Awa said, her voice filled with emotion. "We're going home." Babacar nodded, his heart swelling with love for Awa. "Yes, Awa, we're finally going home, and we're going to build the life we've always dreamed of." As the ferry set sail, Awa and Babacar spent their days exploring the ship, meeting other passengers, and dreaming of their future. They met a young couple who were also returning to Casamance to start a new life, and they spent hours talking about their hopes and plans. The days passed peacefully, and Awa and Babacar felt as though nothing could go wrong. They were surrounded by people who, like them, were filled with hope and anticipation. The Joola, with its sturdy structure and experienced crew, seemed like a safe haven as it made its way through the calm waters. Chapter 4. The Calm Before the Storm. As the ferry sailed further south, the weather began to change. The sun that had warmed the deck during the day was replaced by a cooler breeze, and the sky grew overcast. Awa and Babacar, who had spent the day exploring the ferry and talking about their future, noticed the shift in the atmosphere. "I think we should go back to our cabin," Awa said, her voice tinged with concern. "It feels like the weather is changing." Babacar agreed, and they made their way back to their cabin. As they walked through the corridors, they noticed that the crew members were moving quickly, their faces tense, as they prepared for the possibility of bad weather. When they reached their cabin, Awa felt a sense of relief wash over her. The small space with its warm bed and soft lighting felt like a sanctuary from the storm that seemed to be brewing outside. But even as they settled in, the sense of unease lingered. The ferry began to rock more violently, the waves crashing against the hull with a force that rattled the windows. Awa and Babacar lay in bed, holding each other close, trying to ignore the growing storm outside. As the night wore on, the storm intensified. The wind howled, and the ferry was tossed about like a toy in the turbulent sea. The lights flickered, and the sound of the waves pounding against the ship grew louder and more menacing. Awa clung to Babacar, her heart pounding with fear. "Babacar, I'm scared," she whispered, her voice trembling. Babacar held her tightly, trying to calm her. "I know, Awa, but we're together and we'll get through this. Just hold on to me." But even as he spoke, Babacar couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The storm was getting worse, and the ferry was struggling to stay on course. He could feel the tension in the air, the sense that the ocean was preparing to unleash its full fury. Chapter 5. The Storm Unleashed. As the minutes turned into hours, the storm reached its peak. The ferry was thrown about by the waves, its hull groaning under the strain. The lights flickered and went out, plunging the cabin into darkness. The sound of the wind and waves filled the air, a deafening roar that drowned out all other noise. Awa and Babacar held each other tightly, their hearts pounding with fear. They could feel the ferry tilting dangerously, the deck beneath them shifting as the ship struggled to stay upright. And then, with a sudden jolt, the ferry was hit by a massive wave. The impact sent them tumbling from the bed, crashing to the floor as the ship was thrown off course. The sound of the wave crashing against the hull was deafening, a sound that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. As they scrambled to their feet, the cabin was plunged into chaos. The furniture was thrown about, and the floor tilted at a dangerous angle. The sound of the storm was overwhelming, a cacophony of wind, waves, and the creaking of the ship's timbers. Awa and Babacar knew they had to get out, to find a way to safety. But as they made their way to the door, the ferry was hit by another wave, even more powerful than the last. The impact sent them crashing to the floor once again, and this time the ship began to capsize. Panic set in as the realization of the ferry's perilous situation became clear. The Joola, once a symbol of their journey home, was now a vessel of danger. The ship's tilting grew more pronounced, and with every lurch, the terror among the passengers escalated. Babacar grabbed Awa's hand, pulling her close to him. "We have to get to the deck," he shouted over the roar of the storm. "We need to get to the deck." Awa nodded, her face pale with fear, but her grip on Babacar's hand was firm. Together, they fought their way through the dark, tilting corridors of the ferry, their only thought to escape the sinking ship. Chapter 6. The desperate struggle. The corridors were filled with passengers, all trying to find their way to safety. The panic was palpable, the fear in the air suffocating. People pushed and shoved, desperate to reach the deck, their cries of terror mixing with the sounds of the storm. Babacar held tightly to Awa's hand, determined not to let her go. The ferry was tilting more dangerously with each passing moment, and he knew that their time was running out. The ship was taking on water, and they needed to reach the deck before it was too late. As they reached the stairs leading to the deck, the ferry tilted violently, sending them crashing into the railing. Awa cried out in pain as she hit her side against the metal, but she didn't let go of Babacar's hand. She knew that if they were separated, they might never find each other again. The stairs were slick with water, and every step was a struggle. The ship was tilting so steeply that it was almost impossible to keep their footing. But Babacar urged Awa on, his determination to save her driving him forward. Finally, they reached the deck. The scene that greeted them was one of chaos and terror. The ferry was almost completely on its side, the deck tilting at a dangerous angle. Passengers were clinging to whatever they could find, their faces filled with fear as they tried to escape the sinking ship. The wind howled around them, and the rain lashed against their faces as they looked out at the dark, churning sea. The waves were towering, crashing over the deck and threatening to pull them into the water. Babacar knew they had to find something to hold on to, something that would keep them afloat if the ship went down. He scanned the deck, his eyes searching for anything that could help them. And then he saw it, a wooden plank, floating near the edge of the deck. It was their only chance. "Awa over there," Babacar shouted, pointing to the plank. "We have to get to that plank." Awa nodded, her face pale with fear, but she didn't hesitate. She followed Babacar as he made his way towards the plank, their steps unsteady on the tilting deck. As they reached the plank, the ferry gave one final violent lurch. The deck tilted so steeply that they were thrown off their feet, sliding towards the edge of the ship. Babacar grabbed hold of the plank, pulling Awa close to him as they struggled to stay on the deck. And then, with a sickening groan, the ferry capsized completely, throwing them into the cold, dark waters of the ocean. Chapter 7. Adrift in the ocean. The shock of the cold water was overwhelming, and for a moment, everything went black. Awa struggled to the surface, gasping for air as the icy waves crashed over her. The ocean was a chaotic, churning mass of water and debris, and the ferry was nowhere to be seen. "Awa!" Babacar's voice cut through the darkness, and Awa turned towards the sound. She saw him struggling to stay afloat, holding onto the wooden plank that had been their only hope. "Babacar!" Awa cried, her voice filled with relief as she swam towards him. "I'm here! I'm here!" Babacar reached out, grabbing her hand and pulling her close. "Hold on to the plank, Awa," he said urgently. "We have to stay together." Awa clung to the plank, her heart pounding with fear. The ocean was vast and unforgiving, and they were just two small figures adrift in the middle of it. The storm was still raging, the waves towering above them and threatening to pull them under. But Babacar refused to give up. He held on to Awa with one hand and the plank with the other, his determination to keep her safe giving him strength. "We're going to get through this, Awa," Babacar said, his voice filled with quiet resolve. "We've come this far, and we're not giving up now." Awa nodded, tears streaming down her face as she clung to him. The cold was unbearable, and her body ached from the effort of staying afloat. But Babacar's words gave her hope, and she knew that as long as they were together, they had a chance. They drifted in the water for what felt like hours, the storm showing no signs of abating. The waves tossed them about like rag dolls, and every minute was a struggle to stay afloat. But through it all, Babacar never let go of Awa's hand. Finally, as dawn began to break, the storm began to subside. The waves grew smaller, and the wind died down, leaving the ocean calm and still. The first light of the sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm, golden glow over the water. Awa and Babacar were exhausted, their bodies numb with cold and fatigue. But the sight of the sun filled them with a renewed sense of hope. They had survived the storm, and now they had to survive the aftermath. Chapter 8. The Long Wait. The hours that followed were some of the longest of Awa and Babacar's lives. The ocean was calm, but the sense of isolation and uncertainty was overwhelming. They had no idea where they were, no idea if help was coming, and no idea how long they could last. Awa's strength was fading fast. The cold had seeped into her bones, and her limbs felt heavy and unresponsive. She could feel her grip on the plank loosening, and she knew that she couldn't hold on much longer. "Babacar," Awa whispered, her voice trembling with exhaustion. "I don't know how much longer I can hold on." Babacar's heart clenched at the sight of her suffering. He knew that their situation was dire, but he refused to let go of hope. "Just a little longer, Awa," he urged, his voice filled with determination. "We have to keep fighting. We have to survive." Awa nodded weakly, her eyes closing as she fought to stay awake. She could feel her body shutting down, her mind drifting in and out of consciousness. But Babacar's voice was a lifeline, keeping her anchored to the present. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and the heat began to sap their strength even further. They were dehydrated, their throats dry and parched, but the salty seawater offered no relief. The hours dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity. Finally, as the afternoon sun began to dip towards the horizon, Awa heard a sound that made her heart skip a beat. It was faint, but unmistakable, the distant hum of an engine. "Babacar," Awa whispered, her voice filled with urgency. "Do you hear that?" Babacar strained his ears, and then he heard it too, a faint rhythmic hum that grew louder with each passing second. His heart leaped with hope, and he scanned the horizon, searching for the source of the sound. And then he saw it, a small white boat cutting through the water, heading straight towards them. The sight filled him with a sense of relief so powerful that tears welled up in his eyes. "Awa, it's a boat," Babacar exclaimed, his voice choked with emotion. "We're saved." Chapter 9. The Rescue. The boat drew closer, and Awa and Babacar waved their arms frantically, shouting for help. The crew on the boat spotted them almost immediately and changed course, steering the vessel towards the makeshift raft. Within minutes, the boat was alongside them, and a group of rescuers reached out to pull Awa and Babacar onto the deck. The relief they felt as they were lifted out of the water was overwhelming, and they clung to each other, tears streaming down their faces. "We're safe," Babacar whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "We made it, Awa. We're safe." Awa nodded, her heart filled with gratitude and love. "Thank you, Babacar," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Thank you for never giving up on me." The rescuers quickly wrapped them in warm blankets and gave them water to drink. The boat's crew was kind and compassionate, reassuring Awa and Babacar that they were safe and that they would be taken to the nearest port as quickly as possible. As they sat on the deck of the boat, wrapped in each other's arms, Awa and Babacar felt a deep sense of relief and gratitude. They had survived the storm, the endless night, and the vast, unforgiving ocean. They had fought for their lives and their love, and they had made it. The boat's captain approached them, his face filled with concern. "Are you two okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. "You've been through a lot." Awa nodded, her voice filled with emotion. "We're okay now," she said softly. "Thank you for saving us." The captain smiled, his eyes filled with compassion. "You're brave, both of you," he said. "You survived something most people wouldn't. You should be proud of yourselves." Babacar nodded, his heart swelling with pride and love for Awa. "We couldn't have done it without each other," he said, his voice filled with quiet resolve. "We made a promise to each other and we kept it." As the boat sped towards the nearest port, Awa and Babacar held each other close, their hearts filled with a sense of peace and fulfillment. They had survived the worst, and now they had a future to look forward to, a future filled with love, hope, and endless possibilities. Chapter 10. The Return to Land. The journey back to land felt surreal to Awa and Babacar. The trauma of the past few days lingered in their minds, but the gentle rocking of the boat, the warm sunlight, and the knowledge that they were safe brought them a sense of calm they hadn't felt in days. As the boat approached the port, Awa and Babacar could see the shoreline in the distance. The sight of land filled them with relief and anticipation. The crew had been kind, offering them food, water, and warm blankets, but the thought of stepping onto solid ground, of being surrounded by people and life, was overwhelming. Awa turned to Babacar, her eyes filled with gratitude. "We're almost home," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "We're almost there." Babacar nodded, his heart swelling with love for the woman beside him. "We made it, Awa," he said softly. "We survived." As the boat docked at the port, a small crowd of people gathered to watch. Word of the Joola tragedy had spread, and the sight of two survivors being brought to shore was a moment of both sadness and hope. Awa and Babacar were helped off the boat by the crew, their legs shaky from days spent at sea. The ground felt solid beneath their feet, a stark contrast to the endless rocking of the ocean, and they held on to each other for support. The port was bustling with activity, but the sight of Awa and Babacar drew everyone's attention. The crowd watched in silence as they were led towards the waiting medics, their hearts heavy with the knowledge of what these two had endured. As they were examined by the medics, Awa and Babacar clung to each other, their hands intertwined. The physical pain they felt was nothing compared to the emotional toll of the past few days, but they were alive, and that was all that mattered. After a thorough examination, the medics determined that Awa and Babacar were dehydrated and exhausted, but otherwise unharmed. They were given water, food, and clean clothes, and as they sat together in the small clinic, the reality of their survival began to sink in. "We made it, Babacar," Awa whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "We're alive." Babacar nodded, his heart swelling with pride and love for Awa. "We did it, Awa," he said softly. "We survived because we had each other." The medics were kind, offering them words of comfort and support. They had seen many survivors of the Joola tragedy, each with their own story of loss and survival, and they knew that Awa and Babacar would need time to heal. As the day turned into evening, Awa and Babacar were given a small room to rest in. The bed was soft and warm, a far cry from the makeshift raft they had clung to for days, and as they lay down together, they felt a sense of peace and relief. "We're going to be okay, Awa," Babacar whispered, his voice filled with love and reassurance. "We're safe now." Awa nodded, her heart filled with gratitude. "I know, Babacar," she whispered. "Thank you for being there for me, for not giving up." Babacar smiled, his heart filled with warmth. "I could never give up on you, Awa," he said softly. "You're my everything." As they drifted off to sleep, the events of the past few days seemed like a distant nightmare. They had survived the storm, the endless night, and the vast, unforgiving ocean. They had fought for their lives and their love, and now they had a future to look forward to, a future filled with love, hope, and endless possibilities. Chapter 11. Rebuilding. In the days that followed their return to land, Awa and Babacar began the process of rebuilding their lives. The tragedy of the Joola had left deep scars, both physical and emotional, but they were determined to move forward, to honor the lives that had been lost by living their own to the fullest. They spent their days in the small coastal town where they had been brought after their rescue, slowly regaining their strength and recovering from the trauma of their ordeal. The townspeople were kind, offering them support and comfort, and Awa and Babacar found solace in the simple routines of daily life. As the days turned into weeks, Awa and Babacar began to talk about their future, the dreams they had shared on the deck of the Joola, of building a home in Casamance, of starting a family, of living a life filled with love and purpose, had not been forgotten. If anything, their ordeal had only strengthened their resolve to make those dreams a reality. "Awa," Babacar said one evening as they sat together on the beach, watching the sunset. "I know that what we've been through has been incredibly difficult. But I still believe in our dream, in the life we want to build together. I want to go back to Casamance, to start fresh, and to create the life we've always wanted." Awa looked at Babacar, her heart swelling with love and gratitude. Despite everything they had been through, his love for her had never wavered. He was still the strong, determined man she had fallen in love with, and she knew that together they could overcome anything. "I want that too, Babacar," Awa said softly, her voice filled with emotion. "I want to go back to Casamance with you, to build our home, to start our family. I want to live the life we've always dreamed of." Babacar smiled, his heart filled with hope. "Then let's do it, Awa," he said firmly. "Let's go back to Casamance and make our dreams come true." Over the next few weeks, Awa and Babacar made plans to return to Casamance. They reached out to their families, letting them know that they were safe and that they would be coming home soon. The support and love they received from their families was overwhelming, and it gave them the strength they needed to move forward. Finally, the day came when Awa and Babacar were ready to leave the coastal town and return to Casamance. The journey was long, but their hearts were light with the knowledge that they were going home, to the place where their dreams would become a reality. As they arrived in Casamance, the sight of the lush green forests, the winding rivers, and the vibrant villages filled them with a sense of peace and belonging. This was where they were meant to be, where their journey had led them. Awa and Babacar wasted no time in setting up their new life. They found a small plot of land on the outskirts of a village and began the process of building their home. It was hard work, but they did it together, their love and determination driving them forward. As the weeks turned into months, their home began to take shape. A simple yet beautiful house nestled among the trees, with a garden filled with vibrant flowers and vegetables. It was a place where they could grow old together, where they could raise their family, and where they could live the life they had always dreamed of. And as they stood together in front of their new home, hand in hand, Awa and Babacar knew that they had made it. They had survived the storm, the darkness, and the vast, unforgiving ocean. They had fought for their love, and they had won. Their journey had been long and difficult, but it had led them to this moment, a moment of peace, of love, and of endless possibilities. And as they looked out at the beauty of Casamance, they knew that their future was bright, and that they would face whatever came their way together. Chapter 12. A New Beginning. As the days passed in their new home, Awa and Babacar settled into a rhythm of life that was both peaceful and fulfilling. The house they had built together was a symbol of their resilience, their love, and their determination to create a life filled with meaning and purpose. Awa spent her days tending to the garden, where she grew a variety of fruits, vegetables, and herbs. The garden was her sanctuary, a place where she could connect with the earth and find peace in the simple act of nurturing life. The vibrant colors of the flowers and the fresh, earthy scent of the soil filled her with a sense of contentment and joy. Babacar, meanwhile, worked on the land around their home, planting crops and tending to the livestock they had acquired. He took pride in the work he did, knowing that he was providing for their future, creating a life of self-sufficiency and sustainability. The sweat and toil of his labor were a small price to pay for the life they were building together. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over the horizon, the sky painted in hues of orange, pink, and purple. They would talk about their day, their hopes for the future, and the love that had brought them to this moment. It was a simple life, but it was one that filled them with a deep sense of fulfillment and happiness. Their love for each other had only grown stronger in the months since they had returned to Casamance. The bond they shared was unbreakable, forged in the fires of adversity and strengthened by the trials they had endured. They knew that they could face anything together, that their love was a source of strength and comfort in even the darkest of times. One evening, as they sat on the porch, Awa turned to Babacar, her eyes filled with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "Babacar," she began, her voice soft and tentative, "there's something I've been wanting to tell you." Babacar looked at her, his heart swelling with love and concern. "What is it, Awa?" he asked gently, his voice filled with affection. Awa took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she spoke. I'm pregnant, Babacar," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "We're going to have a baby." For a moment, Babacar was speechless, his mind racing to process what Awa had just said. And then, as the reality of her words sank in, a wide smile spread across his face, and his eyes filled with tears of joy. "Awa," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. That's the most wonderful news I've ever heard. We're going to be parents." Awa nodded, her eyes shining with tears. "Yes, Babacar, we're going to be parents. We're going to have a family." Babacar pulled Awa into his arms, holding her close as tears of happiness streamed down both of their faces. The news of the baby was a symbol of the new beginning they had created together, a testament to the love and determination that had brought them through the darkest of times. As they held each other, their hearts filled with love and anticipation for the future, Awa and Babacar knew that they had been given a precious gift, a chance to create a new life, a new family, and a new chapter in their journey together. Chapter 13. Preparing for the future. The months that followed were a time of joy and anticipation for Awa and Babacar. The news of the baby had filled their hearts with a renewed sense of purpose, and they threw themselves into preparing for the arrival of their child with love and dedication. Awa took special care of herself during her pregnancy, mindful of the precious life growing inside her. She continued to tend to the garden, though she took on lighter tasks as her pregnancy progressed. The garden became a place of reflection for her, a sanctuary where she could connect with the earth and prepare herself for the journey of motherhood. Babacar, too, was filled with excitement and anticipation. He worked tirelessly to ensure that their home was ready for the baby's arrival, making improvements to the house, building a crib, and gathering supplies. Every task he completed filled him with a sense of pride and fulfillment, knowing that he was creating a safe and loving environment for their child. As the months passed, Awa and Babacar's bond grew even stronger. They talked for hours about their hopes and dreams for their child, imagining the life they would create together as a family. They spoke of the values they would instill in their child: love, respect, kindness, and a deep connection to the land and their heritage. The village they lived in was filled with excitement at the news of Awa's pregnancy. The villagers, who had welcomed Awa and Babacar with open arms when they first arrived, were eager to support them as they prepared for the arrival of their child. The women of the village offered Awa advice and shared their own experiences of motherhood, while the men helped Babacar with the tasks around the house and the land. As Awa's due date approached, the excitement in the village grew. The women prepared a traditional celebration to welcome the new life, gathering food, decorations, and gifts for the baby. The sense of community and support filled Awa and Babacar with gratitude, knowing that their child would be born into a loving and nurturing environment. One evening, as Awa and Babacar sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over the horizon, Awa placed her hand on her growing belly, feeling the gentle movements of the baby inside her. "Babacar," she said softly, her voice filled with love, "I can't wait to meet our baby. I can't wait to see the life we'll create together as a family." Babacar smiled, his heart swelling with love as he placed his hand on Awa's belly, feeling the warmth of her skin and the gentle movements of their child. "Neither can I, Awa," he whispered, his voice filled with emotion. "We've been through so much together, and now we have a future filled with love, hope, and endless possibilities." As they sat together, their hands resting on Awa's belly, Awa and Babacar knew that they were ready for the next chapter of their journey. They had survived the storm, the endless night, and the vast, unforgiving ocean. They had fought for their love, and they had won. And now, they were ready to welcome a new life into the world, to create a future filled with love, joy, and the promise of a new beginning. Chapter 14. The Arrival of a New Life. A few months later, under the warm sun of Casamance, the village gathered to celebrate the arrival of a new life. Awa and Babacar, surrounded by family, friends, and neighbors, welcomed their baby into the world. The joy in their hearts was immeasurable as they held their newborn child, a symbol of their love and resilience. The village women sang songs of celebration, their voices carrying the rich traditions of their ancestors. The men offered words of wisdom and support, reminding Babacar of the responsibilities and joys of fatherhood. The entire village was alive with the spirit of unity as everyone shared in the happiness of the moment. Awa looked down at their baby, a beautiful little boy with bright eyes and a calm demeanor. She could see both herself and Babacar in his features, a perfect blend of their love and strength. Her heart swelled with gratitude for the life they had created together. Babacar, too, was overwhelmed with emotion as he held his son for the first time. He had faced so much uncertainty and fear, but now, looking into his son's eyes, he knew that everything they had endured was worth it. This was the beginning of a new chapter, a new journey filled with love, hope, and endless possibilities. As the celebration continued, Awa and Babacar stood together, their son cradled between them, and looked out at the horizon. The journey that had brought them here had been long and difficult, but it had also been filled with moments of profound love and connection. They had survived the storm, the darkness, and the vast, unforgiving ocean. They had fought for their love and for each other, and they had emerged stronger, more united, and ready to face whatever the future might bring. In that moment, with the sun setting over the lush green landscape of Casamance, Awa and Babacar knew that they had found their home, their purpose, and their place in the world. And as they held their son close, they knew that the love they shared would continue to guide them, nurture them, and sustain them through all the days to come. Their story, once marked by tragedy and uncertainty, had become a story of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of love. It was a story that would be passed down through the generations, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, love can light the way and lead to a brighter, more beautiful future. And so, with hearts full of love and gratitude, Awa and Babacar began their new life together, as a family, in the land they had always dreamed of, a life filled with joy, purpose, and the unbreakable bond of eternal love.